Hey there guys, it's Amit, you're watching DevDreamer, and in this lesson, we're going to be building this Dribbble dashboard design from scratch using HTML and CSS. Now you might recognize this from the CSS grid video. In that lesson, we actually built this out using CSS grid alone, but in this lesson, what we're going to be doing is building this from scratch. So we're going to start with a blank canvas and build this out. So the first thing to say is that this isn't my design, of course, this is from Dribbble, and it's from Outcrowd. So I'll leave a link to this in the description box below, do go check them out. I've already opened this in a new window though, so let's go ahead and close this. Okay, there it is there. And the first thing we need to do then is we need to set our project up. So I've used three different tools here. I've used Font Awesome, Flat Icon, and Google Fonts. I'll leave a link to all these in the description box below. So I've used Font Awesome for these icons here. So the checkmark icons, this bell, these more than signs here, as well as this pencil icon and these icons as well. I've used Flat Icon for these buttons over here. So Flat Icon was used for the buttons. And then finally I've used Google Fonts to pull in this font that they're using here. As you can see, they're using the same font throughout this design. And I've already found that font. It's called Poppins. Okay, so let's go ahead and close these. And let's take a look at our project. I've gone ahead and created an index.html file and a style.css file. And I've also got this images folder. And let me just pull in the window here so you can see what we've got inside there. We've got these 4 images here, which relate to these 4 buttons. Okay, we've got this profile images image, which is basically just this here. We've got the DevDreamer logo, which I'll be using for this profile section. And then finally, we've got this Spanish flag, which we're going to be using for this section right here. Okay, so let's start then with building out our HTML. So let's just close this and let's start. So first then, let's work on the HTML. So let's put in the basic shell for our HTML. Okay, let's change this to Dribbble and Punch, because that's the name of this design. Let's also go ahead and link our CSS file. So I'll say link style.css. Let's just double check that this actually is linked up. So I'll just say body and background red. Yep, that's cool. Now I'm also going to pull in my unique Font Awesome script. Okay, and finally then let's add in our Google Font script. Just paste that in like so. Okay, so that's everything in the head section done. Let's now work on the actual design. So one of the questions that I've often had is, how do I approach the structure of my site? Well, one of the things to keep in mind is we're always thinking about our CSS. Remember, the two are connected. So when you're thinking about how to structure your site, you want to make things as easy as possible for yourself when it comes to writing CSS. So the key to writing good HTML is think about how you're going to style this HTML with your CSS. So for example, let's take a look at our design. The first thing that stands out for me is the fact that this design has 1, 2, 3 separate columns. So I'm thinking I'm going to put this into a container, give the container a display of grid, and these are going to be 3 columns. Okay, if we then look at each individual column, we can see that, for example, this one in the middle has 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. So again, we could use CSS grid there to create our rows. We've also got sections where we have elements with space in between them, like for example this image here and this text here, and again this text here and this text here. So we can use something like CSS Flexbox on those elements. So you always want to be thinking ahead about how you're going to be styling this with your CSS. So let's start then by creating a div and ID of container. So let's give ourselves some space. Div and ID of container, and then inside that I want to create 1, 2, 3 divs. We're going to call this one nav, this middle section here is going to be called main, and then this one's going to be called profile. So we'll say nav, main, and finally profile. Let's now work on each of these individually. Let's start with the nav section. So first of all then, we can see that there is a logo, then we have some space, and then we have our 4 buttons or links. So let's go ahead and add those in. And this logo as well looks like it's literally just the letter P, and then it's got some rather intricate box shadowing on there as well. So in our HTML then, in nav, I'm going to create a div with an ID of logo, and then inside that, just normal paragraph tag, and we're going to say P with a full stop. Now let's go ahead and create our links. So we need 4 of them. And now I'm going to use something called emit, and that basically helps us write our HTML a lot faster. So basically, because we want 4 anchor tags, I'm going to say A, and then in brackets we can specify any attributes. So I want this to have an href of just a hashtag, because this isn't actually going to go anywhere, and we want 4 of those, and inside each of those we want an image, and each image will have a class of button. So class button. And now if we hit tab, this should work. Perfect. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 links with 4 images inside them. Okay, let's go ahead and add our images. So for the source, we're going to say images, and this first one was the filter image. So filter, and we'll just give it an alt of filter as well. Then we had dashboard, and I'm going to give this a class of active as well because we've got this indented design here. So let's just add our button in first. So images, dashboard, give it an alt of dashboard as well, and a class of active. And then finally we had profile and stats. So let's add those in. Okay, perfect. So now we've got our 4 images in there. And that's the HTML for our nav section done. So let's go ahead and give this a comment. Say in the nav bar, let's put some space in between these as well. Just separate them. Okay, and now we can work on the next section, which is the main section. Okay, so let's take a look at our design. So you can hear them, we've got the column with 1, 2, 3, 4 sections. Okay, so first let's add this text in here. And let's just give ourselves some space actually as well. So in here, I'm just going to say H2 progress dashboard. Okay, and now for these 3 sections here, I'm going to call this one top, this one middle, and this one bottom. So let's just go ahead and add those in. We want section, and we want 3 of these. This will have a class of top, and just copy this. This of middle, and then finally this of bottom. So let's first work on this top section here. So we have 1, 2, 3 elements. Let's go ahead and add those. So I'm going to call this first one exam, I'll call this one homework, and this one reading. So in our section with a class of top, I'm going to create a class of exam, homework, and reading. I'm also going to give these 2 divs here the same class because as you can see, they're pretty much the same except for the colors and obviously the content. So let's go ahead and give those the same class of to do. Okay, let's now work on this first section. And if you can see what we're doing, guys, we're actually looking at the big picture first, and then we're going into more and more detail for each section. Okay, so for this then, we can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 sections, or elements rather. So let's start at the top. We've got deadline and 12 o'clock. Well, we can see that deadline has different styling to 12 o'clock, but it's also on the same line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say paragraph, and inside this I'm going to do a span. It's going to say deadline, and then for the actual paragraph text I'm going to say 12 o'clock. Just give a space in between these as well. Now if we look carefully, we've got the similar styling that's been applied to this text and this one and these as well, and then these titles here have similar styling as well. You can see they're all pretty much the same size, these as well over here, and then we've got some slightly bigger titles, for example Unit 5, Spanish for Beginners, and Courses Progress. So for these very small titles I'm going to give a class of subtitle. For these large titles here, I'm going to say paragraph, class of large title. What does that say? It says exam-unit 5. So exam-unit 5. Next we have another subtitle here. So I'm going to say paragraph with a class of subtitle, and that says Spanish for Beginners. And then finally we've got this section here where we've got 2 elements with space in between. So I'm actually going to put both of these into a single container, then we're going to use Flexbox on that container so that we can put space in between these items. So I'm going to call that test, and inside that we have our image, and then we have start testing. So image, let's pull in our image, which was this one right here. Just give it an alt as well. And also within our test class, I'm going to put this link here. So an A tag, it's not going to go anywhere, and we're going to say start testing. Okay, so that's this little element done. Now let's work on these 2 here. So let's just close this. Okay, so for these we need to put in our checkmark icon, and this is just from Font Awesome. Okay, so we've got it there. Next we have a title and then some text underneath. So let's give this a class as well. I'm going to call this to do title, and that was homework, and the text was for today's lesson. So okay, so we can actually go ahead and copy this because this element here is pretty much the same. So just going to go in, so we just change this to reading, and the text is 25 words per week. So there we go. So that's this top section now complete. Let's now work on the middle section. So let's go ahead and close the whole top section now actually, and now we can work on the middle section. So for this middle section then, we've got these 2 blocks. We've got this group info one and then this progress one over here. So let's go ahead and create those. So in a section of class for middle, we're going to say class of group for this left one here. And then for the right hand side, I'm going to call this flag progress. Let's work on this first section. Okay, so for this then I can see we've got this header section here, then we've got this bit in the middle, then we've got this sort of footer section in this element. So let's go ahead and name those. So I'm going to say group header, group homework, and finally group footer. Okay, so for this top section then we've got, once again, two elements that are side by side. So I'm going to put these in the same container and then put a display of flex on it. So that container is going to be group header. And so for this part here, I'm going to say, give it a class of title, group info. And then we're going to throw a break tag in and put this span in here. So I'm going to give this a class of subtitle. And that said 13 students in the group. Okay, and then on the other side then we've got this bell icon here. So let's use Font Awesome to put that bell icon in, like so. Perfect, let's now work on the next section, which is going to be this orange section here. So here then we've got pretty much the same thing as this over here. We've got these elements on the left, some space in between, and then this icon over here. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and copy this and paste this in for our middle section called group homework. And let's do the same for footer as well, I believe. Except here we've got a paragraph tag instead of this. So let's go ahead and fill this in. So for a class of group homework, it says group homework. So let's change this to group homework. And then 5 students from your group online now. So okay, and then for the icon we've got this. So you can just put this in from Font Awesome. Finally, for the footer section in here, we've got today's lessons, Unit 6 articles, and then we've already put this in. So today's lesson, and let's change this for Unit 6 articles. Okay, so that's this section complete, and just close this out. Once again here then we've got two separate elements. We've got one here that contains the flag and the title, and then down here we've got this progress bar. So I'm thinking let's put this in a display of flex, set the flex direction to column, and then we can put space in between. So in our HTML, let's give this top section here a class of flag progress title. Inside that we have our image and then the text. So let's drop our image in. There it is right there. And then our title, and again we're going to give this a class of large title. Okay, let's now work on this progress section here. So let's give this a class of flag progress amount. Inside here then we've got the percentage, let's just zoom in, sorry, percentage, and then the progress bar as well. So paragraph, and it was 75%. And then down here we have a progress element with a value of 75, and we'll give it a max of 100 as this is a percentage. Okay, perfect. So that's this middle section then. Let's now work on the final section of our main column, and it's going to be this bottom section here. So again, let's close out our middle class, open up the bottom class, and in here, similar to this section here, we have two elements side by side, but this time they have pretty much the same styling, just different content. So we want to give these unique classes, but also a similar class as well. So let's call the first one bot grammar, and let's also give it a class of bot as well. Bot is just short for bottom. And let's do the same thing here. Let's just copy this actually. Okay, so let's see what we've got then. Once again then we've got these elements, and then a space, and then this element here. So I'm going to create a div for these elements and put them both in there. So div, and we have first of all this pencil icon here. Let's just paste that in from Font Awesome. And then here we've got our class of title and class of subtitle as well. So inside that same div, we're going to say paragraph with a class of title, and we're going to say grammar, and so a break tag in, span with the class of subtitle, and that says plus 30 grammar rules. Okay, and then finally we've got this icon as well. So let's just throw that in like so. Now this section, as I said, is pretty much the same as the other one. So let's just copy this and let's paste it into here. Let's change this to dictionary, plus 10 new words. Okay, and let's change these icons as well. Okay, and so with that then we've finished our main section. Let's now finally work on this profile section over here. Let's just close this out, and let's close this out as well. Let's go ahead and put a comment on this, and I'm just going to say main, and I might as well put one in for this as well of profile. Okay, so for this then we've got three main sections: this picture area here, this add, and then this course progress section. So let's go ahead and first add those in. So we'll call this first section pick, the second one add, and finally the third one progress. And again, let's now focus on each of these, starting with this top section here. Okay, so this has an image and some text. So in here, I'm going to say paragraph with a class of large title. I'm also going to give it a class of name as well. And let's say dev dreamer. Let's also put our image in as well, sorry. So up here, image. Let's go ahead and find that logo. Let's put this in as an alt tag as well. Let's just change it now quickly in here with 200 pixels. And then finally down here, we have this subtitle text. So paragraph with a class of subtitle. We're going to put in here like, share, and subscribe. And if you take a look at this, we've got this box here. And then once again inside that, we've got these elements here on the left, some space in between, and then this element here, this icon. So I'm going to say on a class of add. First of all, for that box, I'm going to give this a class of add box. Then we'll go ahead and style that. And inside that then, I'm going to say paragraph with a class of title. What did it say? Get 10% sale price. So, okay. And then this said for Spanish A2 course. So in a span, let's say for Spanish A2 course. Finally then, let's add this icon in. So that's this add section done. Let's now work on the last section, which is going to be this course progress section. Okay, so for this then, we can see we've got a title, and then we've got these three boxes here. And once again, these three boxes have got pretty much the same styling. The content is the only thing that changes. So we want to give these the same class as well. So first then, let's just put this title in. So paragraph, and we're going to give it our large title class, and it's courses progress. And then for each of these, let's give those a class of progress box. And we've got grammar, dictionary, and reading. So I also want to give each of those a unique class as well. So grammar. And what we can do is pretty much just style this one and then just copy it through. So inside here then, that's what we've got. We've got some text, an icon, and then some more text. So first we'll say paragraph with a class of percent. And this was 63%. Then we have our icon. And then this text says grammar, learn new rules. So we're going to say paragraph with a class of title, grammar, and then in a span with a class of subtitle, we're going to say learn new rules. So there it is right there. Now what we can do is actually, as I said, copy this. So let's just save ourselves some time. So let's copy this. Okay, now let's just go ahead and change that. So this was going to be dictionary and reading. Okay, we've got 78% and 34%. So change this to 78 and 34. Learn 5 new words and train your skill. So let's just say learn new words. So it lines up with this. And finally train your skills. Okay, also we need to put those icons in as well. So this for the dictionary and this for the reading section. Okay guys, and with that then, let's now move on to our styling to make this look a lot better. So let's go to our CSS. Okay, so the very first thing I want to do then is just set some reset styles for our design. So I'm going to say margin 0 pixels, the same for padding, set box sizing to border box. And because we're using the same font on this, let's just go ahead and say font -family, and the font that we want to use is Poppins, and we'll say sans serif as well. Okay, so now we're using that same font throughout. Now the next thing we want to do is add some variables. So let's take a look at this design. The first thing that jumps out to me is the fact that we're using the same sort of colors throughout. We've got this purple, okay, orange, and this red. So let's go ahead and put those in variables. So in our CSS, I'm going to say -root. So setting these variables globally, and I'll also leave a link to my video on CSS variables as well. If you're not sure how variables work, then do go and check that out. They are really, really cool. So first I'm going to say -orange, and we'll get the hex code for this in just a second. And then we'll say purple, and finally -red. And now to find these colors, I'm actually going to use a Google Chrome extension, and I'll leave a link to this in the description box below. So here then, I'm just going to say pick color from web. We've got this purple one here, so it's this right here. So we can just paste that in there. Let's get the orange color as well. Okay, and then finally the same for the red color. Okay, let's see what other variables we can add. So if we look carefully, we can see that all these boxes have a border radius on them, and they seem to be using the same border radius. So let's say border radius, and let's just say 10 pixels. And also these boxes here, this one, these three here, and these two down here, have all got the same border style. So I'm going to say hyphen border, let's create a variable for that, and we'll just go for, let's say 0.5 solid light grey. Okay, so that's all our resets and our variables as well. And now what I'm going to do next is we want our design to always be 100% in height. So I'm going to say body and HTML and set the height on this to 100 view height. Let's now start with the container. So let's say container, and I'm going to give this a width of 100 view width and a height of 100%. So on this we also want to say a display of grid, and we want 1, 2, 3 columns. So we're going to say grid template columns, and we're going to say 1FR, 6FR and 3FR. And so now if we take a look at our page, we've got 1, 2, 3 columns. I'm also going to set grid template areas on this as well. So grid template areas, and for those of you that recall, this is a visual representation of our container. So N for nav, M for main, and P for profile, and we'll add these to the relevant sections when we come on to them. So let's start then with this nav section. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to move this across. Okay, so we're just focusing on this nav section. So let's put a comment in here. Let's give ourselves some space. Select this by saying ID of nav, and let's get this background color first. So we'll use this. So we'll say background color and paste this in. Okay, so we've got the background color in there. Let's set grid area on this to N, and now I'm also going to give this a display of grid as well, and then we're going to set some grid template roles inside it. So if you have a look at this, we could say that each button takes up one row. So this would be 1, 2, 3 and 4. Up here the logo will take another one, so that's 5, 6, 7 and 8. So we're going to say grid template rows, repeat 8, 1FR, and let's also place these items in the center. So here we can see they're centered horizontally and vertically. So we're going to say place hyphen items center, and that hasn't worked because we haven't actually put display of grid on here yet. Okay, so now they're all centered, and so nav is now a grid container that has 8 rows inside. Now if you take a look at our logo, we can see that the logo seems to be taking up more space than a single row. It seems to start up here and end down here with all this empty space. So let's go ahead and select the logo. Okay, and I'm going to say grid row 1 stroke 3. And all that basically means is start on grid row line 1 and end on grid row line 3. Let's go ahead and do the same for these buttons as well. I'm actually just going to expand this a bit. So let's first select all of these buttons. Okay, and now let's add in the grid rows. So we want this one to start on row line 3 and end on line 4. This to be 4 stroke 5, 5 stroke 6, and then finally 6 stroke 7. Okay, now let's go ahead and style this logo here. So if you look carefully, we can see that there's a dark border on the bottom and the right, and there's a light border on the top and the left. There's also an inset border, which means that we're placing the border inside our element, a dark one here and then a light one here, which gives it this really cool embossed effect. So let's see if we can recreate this. Okay, so let's go ahead and select our logo, and let's just zoom into this as well here. Okay, so we're trying to recreate this. First of all, let's give it a color, and we're going to use our variable, which was hyphen red. Let's increase the font size to 2 EM and the font weight to bold. Okay, let's give it a width and height as well, so we can create that square. So width of 70 pixels and a height of 70 pixels as well. And now let's work on this box shadow. So box hyphen shadow. So first we're going to say 5 pixels, 5 pixels, 8 pixel blur with 0.2. Okay, now because we're doing multiple values, these need to be comma separated. Next we're going to work on the white shadow on the other side. So we're going to say -5 pixels, -5 pixels, a pixel blur again. And this time we want to say 255 and 0.6. Okay, so now we've got the dark shadow and then the light shadow on the other side as well. Let's now work on these shadows on the inside. So we do that using insert. And we'll go for 0.8. So now if you can look very carefully here, we've got a white shadow here on the inside of our square. Let's now do the same for this side, but it's going to be a dark shadow. And check this out, guys. This gives us this really cool embossed 3D effect. Really, really cool. Let's move our lettering into the middle by saying display flex, justify content center, center it horizontally, and then center it vertically. We can say align items center as well. Okay, so this is what we wanted, and this is what we've got. Let's just zoom out. Let's now work on styling these buttons. And for this, we can say opacity of 0.4. I'll just zoom out now of this. Okay, so you can see these are slightly lighter, and also a padding of 10 pixels. Let's also specify a width and height on this. So width of 45 pixels and a height of 45 pixels as well. Now we want to also style this active button here. So quite similar to our box shadow on here, instead this is just on the inside. Let's just zoom in so to show you. A light shadow here and then a darker shadow there. So let's see if we can do that. So on here, let's zoom into this one here and select the class of active. Let's go ahead and add the box shadow. So we can say box hyphen shadow. And 0.8, and then for the other side, okay, we can't really see that, so let's bump that up to 0.2, 0.3, 0.4 maybe. Yeah, that'll do, I think. And with that, we're done with our nav section. Let's now work on the next section, which is the main section. Okay, let's go ahead and put a comment in here. Okay, so first then, we don't need to change the background color on this because it's already white. We've got a padding on either side. And we can say padding 0 pixels on the top and bottom and 100 pixels either side. Just move this up slightly. Let's set our grid area, which was M. Grid of an area of M. Let's also give this a display of grid, and we want 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. And if you look carefully, grids 1, 2, and 4 roughly have the same height. So we're going to say display grid first. Let's not forget that this time. And grid template rows is going to be 1FR, 1FR auto for row 3, and then 1FR for the bottom row. Okay, next let's style this H2 up here. So we're going to say main H2. Okay, so let's change the color and the font size. Now I'm actually going to bring the font weight of this down. As you can see, ours is a lot thicker than this is. So font weight, let's add some letter spacing as well. If we have a look at the design, we can see that this is actually placed at the bottom of its cell vertically, and horizontally it's at the start. So we're going to say, because remember this is a grid item, we can say place hyphen self end and start. I'm also going to say margin bottom of 20 pixels to move it up a bit. Let's now work on this next section, which was our top section. So we'll say section with a class of top. Just move this up slightly. So we're looking for this one here. So first of all, I'm going to give this a display of grid with 3 columns. And this first column is going to be bigger than these two over here. So I'm going to say display of grid and then grid template columns. And for this first column, I'm going to say 3FR and then 1FR, 1FR for the other two. Okay, so this is what we've got so far. Let's go ahead and style these now. Let's start with this one. So this had a class of exam and the background color is our purple. So we're going to say background color, we're going to use our variable of hyphen hyphen purple. Let's also use our border radius variable hyphen hyphen border radius. That didn't work. Why doesn't that work? Okay, because it's not hyphen radius but just simply border radius. Okay, cool. Let's change the color to white. Let's give it a padding. And we need to space these out, so I'm going to say display of flex. Okay, by default it's set to row. I'm going to change this to flex direction of column, and justify content space around. Okay, now let's work on this bottom section here, which had a class of test. We're going to give it a display of flex. Okay, so now they're side by side. We're going to align these vertically so they're both centered. So we're going to say align items center. So now they're both aligned in the center on the vertical line. And finally, to put some space in between them, we're just going to say justify content space between. Okay. Next, let's actually sort these titles out as well. So up here, actually, I'm going to say title, a class of subtitle, and a class of large title. So for title, it's basically these over here. So let's set these to, okay, for subtitle, which was basically these here. And then finally for large title, which was basically exam unit 5, Spanish for beginners, course progress, name as well. Okay, so now this is starting to look a bit more like this. Let's sort out this link over here. Next, we're going to work on these to-do sections. So we've got pretty much the same styling for them. So I'm going to say, let's give ourselves some space again. I'm going to say class of to-do. So display flex. Okay, again, so everything's been set to flex direction of row by default. Let's change this by saying flex direction column, because we want them stacked on top of each other. And then let's also say justify content space between. Okay, let's increase the font size of our icons. Let's also style the text inside. Okay, now let's style them individually. So now I can also see that there's some spacing in between these columns. So back on section top, we're going to say column gap of 25 pixels. Now the last thing we need to do is, if we look carefully at this, on ours the section is filling up the full row, whereas on the design it's actually pushed up at the start. So on section top, I'm going to say align content start, and now you can see it's pushed up slightly. Brilliant, that's this top section done. Let's now work on the middle section. Okay, so we also want to give this a display of grid, and we've got 2 columns in here. So we're going to say display grid, and then grid template columns. We'll just say repeat to modifier. Okay, so now we've got this section here and this section here side by side. Let's first work on styling this one here. Okay, so first one, let's apply this box shadow onto this. So box shadow, and I'm going to go for 4 pixels, 6, and 20 pixel blur. The color is going to be light gray. We've also got our border radius on there as well. So next we want to give it a padding as well. Okay, all around. And we want to set the content in here with display of flex. So remember, we've got 1, 2, 3 items. So we're going to say display of flex. Again, by default, it's all set to row. We can change that by saying flex direction column and justify content space between. Let's set a height on this because at the moment it's, well, way too big. So height of 350 pixels. Okay, now let's work on these 3 sections individually. So first is top one here. So this had a class of group header, and here then again we're going to set this to a display of flex and justify content space between. So display of flex. Okay, so these 2 here, and then to put space between them, justify content space between. Now let's work on this middle section here, this orange box. Once again, let's set this to a display of flex. And we can say justify content space around this time. And see that, let's just increase the size of this. We also need to align these items to the center. Okay, as you can see, our icon up here is off center, so we can say align items center. And finally then, let's give this a height of 150 pixels. Finally, let's work on styling this bottom section down here. Let's give this a display of flex. And it's pretty much the same thing as before. We've got two elements side by side. So we're going to say justify content space between. Okay, so it's starting to take shape. Let's now work on this section. So that was called flag progress. Let's set the display on this to flex. And we want to set this to column. So flex direction column. Let's first just minimize the size of this. So let's set the size of this by saying flag progress image, and we'll set this to a width of 50 pixels. Okay, so that's a lot better. Let's also give this padding as well around, box shadow of, and for the border radius, again we'll say to our variable. In fact, I'm just going to bump this up slightly because I don't think it's 10 pixels, I think it's slightly more. Go for 12 pixels. Okay, let's now continue working on the overall container here. So flag progress, so we'll say justify content space around. Okay, align items flex start, and let's give it a padding of 40 pixels and 80 pixels. Let's now work on starting this progress bar over here. So for that, we're going to say, and then let's style the actual color in here. So we're going to say, and we're going to set the background color on this to our variable of orange. So hyphen orange, and give it a border radius of 8 pixels. So now we can see that the value has a border radius on either side of 8 pixels. Let's do the same for the container. So that's going to be the progress bar. So let's just change this to bar, and the same border radius. So that's the middle section done as well. Finally then, for our middle column, let's work on this bottom section down here. Okay, so let's select a section with a class of bottom. So I'm going to say display of grid. Once again, grid template columns. It's going to be repeat to 1FR. We've also got a column gap as well on here. So let's say column gap of 25 pixels. And now let's start styling each individual section. So first of all, we've got the same class, so class of bot. And now let's use display flex inside of these to sort out the text. So we're going to say display of flex. And why isn't that done what we want it to do? Let's go back to our HTML. And it's going to be in main section class of bottom. And okay, I see the problem. We've actually put the icon inside the div, so we want this to be separate. So put this outside and put this icon outside of that div as well. Okay, so now you can see the two elements, this one and this one, are side by side. That's what we wanted. Now we're going to say justify content to space around and center them vertically. We're going to say align items center. Perfect. Now let's work on these here. So you can see ours are stacked on top of each other. So we want to go ahead and select those. This gives us some more space as well. So we're going to say give this container a display of flex. Okay, so these now are side by side. Also give it a flex basis of 50%. Let's align this vertically as well. And finally, justify content space around. Let's now work on these icons. And we can't see the shadow, so let's go ahead and let me just zoom in as well, sorry. Okay, let's go ahead and put a padding on this of 15 pixels. Okay, now let's go ahead and color these. Now the last thing we want to do here is on our design we can see that we've got some spacing in between, whereas with ours this row and this row are bunched up close together. So for that we just want to go back to our section of bottom and we want to say align items center. Perfect, so that's now the first section and the second section done. Let's now work on the final section, which is the profile section. So let's just move this up and let's go. So first of all then, let's put a comment in. Let's select profile. And this has its own background color. So once again, let's go ahead and find that background color. Okay, it's also got some padding either side. So we're going to say padding 0 pixels on the top and 100 pixels on the side. And this was grid area P, so grid-area P. Now if you look at our container, we can also set this to display of grid, as we've got 1, 2, 3 rows. So I'm going to say display of grid and grid template rows of 30%, 15% and then 55% for the last one. Okay, so it's taken shape. Let's now work on this top section here. And we're going to say display of flex, set the flex direction to column, and then we want to say justify content center and align items center as well. Okay, now let's work on our image. Perfect, now let's work on this next section here, which was the add. So we've got this add box here. So add box was our class. And now for the content, we're going to say display of flex, justify content, space around. Let's say align items center, and let's give it a padding of 20 pixels. Okay, so now let's work on this icon here. Just zoom in to show you. So now finally then, let's work on this course's progress section. So let's go ahead and select it with the class of progress. And let's give this a display of flex, flex direction column, and then justify content, we'll go for space evenly. Now let's work on these individual boxes. So that had a class of, well they rather had a class of progress box. Let's now give this a display of flex. Let's align these vertically, so we're going to say align items center, so now they're aligned vertically. Let's say justify content, space evenly. Okay, so we're getting there. Let's work on these percentages here. Let's go ahead and just copy this for the other two. Now let's work on these icons. Of border radius. And with that guys, I believe we're done. So let's go ahead and maximize this. Okay, so this is what we wanted. This was the design and this is what we've got. So that's it for this lesson guys. I hope you found it helpful and useful. If you did, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button down below, and don't forget to share the video as well. Also, let me know in the comment section down below if you want to see more videos like this where we take a design and then recreate it from scratch. So get practicing, don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.